Okay, so we're going to continue with our lesson, moving to the next page in our activity book, which is page 27, activity 3.2. We're going to keep going with the idea of personification, and we're going to begin by copying down a definition onto page 27. So based on what we discussed in our previous video, we talked about how personification is basically when we give a human quality to something that is not a human. So I have written the definition for personification here on the board, and I'll give you a minute to copy that down as I read through it. Personification, describing non-human things as if they had human qualities or acted in human ways. That's our definition for the idea of personification, which is one of our figurative languages. Authors love to use figurative languages in their writing because it makes their readers stay more interested in the materials that they're showing them. So that's why we're focusing on this idea. Also in your books, on activity page 3.2, which is page 27, you're going to see several blanks that you're going to have to fill in over the next few pages. This is one of your graded assignments. You'll see that it is a page for you to return. So make sure that you're paying close attention to what we're putting down. We're going to walk through the example that they provide you together. We're also going to go through another example from one of the others that they have you completing and discuss the chart that's on the next page and how to complete that. So let's start by looking at the example. Our directions here say the sentences that follow all contain examples of personification. For each one, identify the non-human thing and the human quality used to describe it. Then rewrite the sentence in your own words without using personification. In order for us to be able to do that, you've got to know what that personification means in that sentence and what your author or your writer is trying to help you to see or to visualize by using that personification in their writing. The example that our book gives us is the sun smiled down on the ball field. Some things to think about when you see something like this, when you see an example of personification being used. One of the things that you want to pick out is in that sentence, you want to look for the non-human thing. In this case, the non-human thing that's doing something in our sentence is the sun. All right, that goes back to the previous activity that we performed where we were locating the subjects in our sentence. The sun is our subject, and in this case, it's a non-human subject. The next thing to think about is the human quality or the human action that's taking place. Well, our non-human thing, which is the sun, is said to have smiled in our sentence. So our human quality or action is smiled. This is like in our last activity when we were finding the verbs in the sentence, the action that our subject was carrying out. Before you're going to be able to do the rewrite part of this activity, you're going to have to understand what is being represented by saying that the sun smiled. What does it mean if my author wrote in the text that the sun smiled onto the ball field? Well, we have to try to visualize that, and that's really where this is going to help us. If I'm visualizing the sun smiling down on a ball field, then I'm picturing the sun shining, and it's so bright and beautiful. So if I were rewriting that sentence, I would say, the sun shone brightly on the ball field. Remember, when you rewrite the sentence, you cannot include personification. So you really have to think about, what is it that my subject is doing in that sentence? Okay, so that's the example provided to us. Let's look through some of the others that we have. For number 2 here, you have 1, 2 on page 27. They're labeled A and B. You have 2 others on page 28 labeled C and D. And then you're going to really evaluate your skill level after this when you're able to fill out numbers 3 and 4. Remember, all of these portions have to be returned for a grade to your teacher. You can do that either by taking a picture or scanning and uploading to Google Classrooms, or from tearing these out, putting your first and last name, and your teacher's name and putting them into the drop box or the mailbox out in the front of the school. We're going to go through one more example together. I'm going to erase the sun example that they provided up here, and we'll fill in this other as we go. So I'm going to take out the parts up here that were from our sun example. And we're going to work with the sentence that's provided for us in A. This sentence says, before electricity, the village went to sleep at sundown. Okay, I've added our sentence to the board, and I've put in, before electricity, the village went to sleep at sundown. Now, what we're going to think about here is, what is the non-human thing that's doing something in this sentence? I'm going to work with this one just like we did in our examples on the last video. So if I'm looking at my subject, what's doing something? The village is my subject. That means that the village is my non-human thing. So on your blank in your book on page 27 under sentence A, for non-human thing, you can write village. Now I want to think about, what is my human quality or my action that my village is doing? So when I look at my sentence, before electricity, the village went to sleep at sundown. The action that the village is doing is going to sleep. So I'm going to underline this section here, went to sleep. That's telling me what my village is doing. So my human quality or action is went to sleep. Make sure that you fill this in as we're going through it in your book, because remember, this is a page that you're going to turn in. Lastly, what I'm supposed to do for each of these sentence examples is I'm supposed to rewrite this sentence. So I have to think about, what does that mean? Well, I'm thinking about the time period here that it's speaking of as well. This is all happening before electricity. So nowadays, we have electricity. So even if the sun goes down, we can keep our lights on. We can keep doing things. We have businesses that still operate well into the night. We have jobs that carry on overnight hours. So even though the sun has gone down, because of electricity, we're able to keep going. In this case, before electricity was invented and widespread, the village went to sleep at sundown. Basically, what that is saying is that everything shut down. Everything stopped when the sun went down. Because when the sun went down, they couldn't keep the lights on in their homes. They couldn't keep the lights on in businesses, things like that. So when we're rewriting our sentence, we want to keep that idea in mind. Before electricity, the village stopped at sundown, or the village stopped working at sundown. The village shut down at sundown. You could use any of these options as your rewrite sentence. Before electricity, the village stopped at sundown, I think would probably be one of your best options here. Okay? Please feel free to come up with your own example. Now that we have found our non-human thing and our human quality that we have, which is going to sleep, we're wanting to rewrite this sentence, replacing went to sleep with something that is not an example of personification. All right? Take just a moment, work through that one. Go ahead and go through sentences B, C, and D. Fill out the non-human things, the human quality or action, and also rewriting that sentence. Remember, when you rewrite a sentence, just like the format they have given you, and just like the things that we were learning in our mentor sentences, start with a capital letter, End with a punctuation mark. All right, this next part that we're going to work on is on page 28 in your book. It's the chart down here at the bottom. Now, I've copied the first line of the chart onto the board, and I've also, I'm going to show you some things that you can include with lightning, but please note that it does say up here that there are no right or wrong answers. Use your imagination. Yes? I apologize for that. Okay, so back to what we were doing. We have our chart that you have in your textbook. And again, number 3 says at the bottom of your instructions here that there are no right or wrong answers. Just use your imagination. And this is just to help you practice with your personification skill. So I've listed the example that they've given us, and you have 3 others to complete. I'm going to give you one more thing that I could think of for a human quality for the wind, give you 2 examples for the lightning, 1 or 2 examples for that, and I want you to complete the waves on the shore, the rest of the lightning, and an electric fan. So our directions say, what human qualities could you use to describe the following non-human things? For the wind, they have moaning, whispering, or making a mess. I know sometimes when the wind is blowing hard enough, it even sounds like it's whistling. So I'm going to add whistling. Now, for the lightning, some of the things that I could think of for the lightning, and again, I don't want to give you too many examples because I want to leave some for you to think of. But when I think of lightning and what it does when it strikes, I could use in the sentence how the lightning raced to the ground. So I'm going to put raced. You may even say something about the sound that it makes or the actions that it carries out, something that you think of when you hear the term lightning. So go ahead and take some time to fill out the rest of that chart. And then we're going to move into the last part of our language activity, which is on page 29, and it's for number 4. All right, number 4 is the true test of your skills, what you've learned during this lesson. For number 4, you have 3 sentences, sentence A, B, and C. In those sentences, your direction wants you to rewrite them using personification. So this is kind of reversed from what you did in your sentences for number 2, where you had to rewrite them taking out the personification. They're going to give you basic sentences, and they want for you to think about, kind of like we did in our chart up here, think about what kind of qualities that you could give those non-human objects, and then use some of those qualities in sentence form. So the first sentence is the thunder was very loud. Think about some of the things that you could say about thunder. It's a non-human thing. How could you describe it using human qualities or characteristics? Number 2, the bee flew from flower to flower. Think about that flight pattern. Think about what they look like when they fly. Maybe compare them to something that's a human. Give them a human quality. Rewrite that using that personification in your sentence for part B. Sentence C says, when I read my favorite book, I imagine I'm in another place and time. All right, you have to take that sentence now. Think about personification that you could include into that sentence, putting yourself in that situation. Rewrite the sentence, inserting that personification. Remember, when you're rewriting sentences, start with a capital letter. You end with the proper punctuation mark. So what you should have completed up to this point throughout the last video and this one, you should be finished with pages 25 through 29. Remember that those have to be returned with your full name at the top of them and your teacher's name, either scanned and uploaded to Google Classrooms or left in the mailbox out front for the return of distance learners information or distance learners papers.